It's John Daigle, my friend. Welcome, Mind of Mansion program, coming at you.
Our annual trip around the sun together. Always excited to get together, usually around this time, a month, maybe a little bit closer to the season. That way we can quick hit everything before everyone approaches their weekend drafts.
And now you're over at Establish the Run, one of the best content, if not the best content site for fantasy football of all time. Some of my best friends in the industry, yourself, Adam Levitan, Evan Silva, of course, the OG. So what do you got cooking over there at ETR?
It's been a fun journey to finally reunite with all my best friends. I even helped build Fantasy Labs with Adam Levitan. That's when we first meet, obviously overlapped with everyone at Roto World as well. And so what really it's become is not only taking a little bit of the load off Silva's plate after he had health concerns. Him and I, the past few years, have done all of these things separately at different companies, 32 team previews, positional tiers, positional top 150. Now we're splitting it all. And it makes it so much easier because we get to yell at each other in Slack about what we think the other is wrong. And then we can also take that extra little bit of fun layers and add it to our content as well. I've even, for those reading the positional tiers and team previews and coming up matchups during the regular season, I've even sprinkled in some conversations we've had behind the scenes that he may not even be aware, honestly, made the column, but it's more fun for everyone to get to see those conversations that we have behind the curtain. So that's what's going on at ETR right now, is just getting everyone ready for the regular season and their drafts.
Yeah, Evan Silva made me. Like Evan Silva.
All of us.
Evan Silva essentially spiked the football on my audience. I had like 1,000 followers. He found me. I was tweeting out all these advanced metrics like crazy. And he's like, oh, this guy's a great follow. And then, bang, I went right to like 10,000 followers. It was incredible. It was like the Mario mushroom. So I am always forever indebted to Evan Silva.
I do wish y'all would bring back your annual 30 for 30 breakdown of one particular franchise, but I get it. Both of you have so many other important things going on in your life that it's hard to overlap now for something that takes so much research. But just know, I always loved those annual episodes.
We called the demise of the Giants. We called the demise of the Texans. We called the demise of the Bears. It was a special thing. It really was a special thing. Even we doubted the rebuild of the Browns. The Browns' original rebuild collapsed, and then it was only the second sort of Phoenix rising in Cleveland that where we see the current iteration of the Browns. So yeah, we were on a heater there for like 5 years, and now Evan is, he's boxing. He's getting in the shape of his life for training camp, which is just perfect. So his narrative aligns with the narrative of a bunch of these football players. And so next year it's back in play. It's back in play. I'm certainly going to approach him next year about it. We'll see what he says.
You will also be a little more open after taking Player Profiler to new heights with the Fast Draft app as well. So both of you will have a little extra time on your hand, hopefully next year, to get it done.
Yeah, Fast Draft is currently in soft launch mode. So today is the first day of the soft launch. So this is the soft. This is not a big announcement. We're not on social media waving the flag or anything. But friends of the show, the people that watch the stream live, you, me, a whole bunch of friendlies, the friendly people, are now going to the App Store, Google Play, getting Fast Draft and starting to draft. And, we're not in any hurry. These things take time. It's been a 2-year process. I remember pitching you the idea, talking about the idea with you 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So this is a milestone day for me and the whole organization. And so yeah, now everyone can feel free to check it out. You might have noticed on fastdraft.app that the coming soon has been taken down because now you can actually download it and play. There's an all flex game, draft 6, start 4 best ball, seasonal best ball format, and then there's an all rookie game. So we're starting with an all flex and an all rookie, and there's a lot of other games coming out. But the whole thing is about speed. It's all easy, no frills, no curveballs, no special scoring, just the most vanilla scoring. The whole point of the app, the hook of the app is the speed, is the 20-second time clock, is the fact these drafts take 8 minutes. That's what it's all about. It's best ball for people that don't have the time and want to wait in line for their kid, do a draft, have to go to the bathroom, do a draft. That's what Josh Larkey said to me. He's like, I love the idea of this because I've always wanted to be able to draft while taking a shit. That's what he said.
That's sometimes it's all the reason you need.
Yeah. Yeah. So that basically, people are like, oh, fast draft. Yeah. Fart noise. No, really, seriously. Yeah. You're going to be drafting while you're farting. That's the beauty of this app. That's why we did it. That's why I was like, man, I just want to be able to do a fun best ball draft, while I'm taking a dump, that I'm gonna move heaven and earth, right? For 2 years, I'm gonna move heaven and earth to make that possible, because I can't be, watching YouTube and all these other little activities, playing chess, all these things. No more. Now you have an activity while you're taking a dump. That's really what it is. Everything else is ancillary. Everything else is an aside, a bonus. It's really the dump activity for fantasy football. It's the best dump activity in the history of fantasy football.
Except Fast Draft is a better title than Dump Activity, so that's why it's named.
Well, that was the second name. That was the runner-up.
Didn't clear the floor, yeah.
Right? Yeah, was Dump Draft. Right? Dump Draft was there. We were like, God, Dump Draft or Fast Draft? I don't know, man. Fast. The one thing I will say, the pride I take the most is when people say, I can't believe that name was available. How'd you get that name? And I was like, yeah, we trademarked it. No one had it. It was open. It was like one of those things where, once in a while you'll check a URL and it's available, right? You're like, oh man, that website's available? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it just happened to be. Yeah, so we took it. That was it. So yeah, it's very cool. It's special that it's soft launching today, and you were one of the first people I told about the idea 2 years ago. So it's just the full circleness, like the circular nature of life. Love it, man. Loving life.
It continues to be the perfect time for us to sit down. That reason alone.
So let's talk about it. We'll look at ADPs around the industry. Give me a few players where the ADP is moving, and you're either disagreeing with that movement, you're curious about that movement, you don't understand the movement, you do understand the movement. Let's just talk about some intriguing ADP movers right now.
One in particular that stands out is Nick Chubb. And that's because I thought we just did this last year with Javonte Williams. But the way everyone reacts, and this goes back for over 5 years now, ever since training camp news heightened, maybe even since the birth of Roto World, which is the entire point of Roto World, was to get that training camp news out there to everyone, is that everyone still overreacts as opposed to stopping and then asking themselves why they should react. And last year, although we knew Javonte Williams' serious injury, he returned to training camp and started playing. And then everyone overreacted and began drafting him again. But that wasn't the point. The long-term stance is that this player is still injured, and so we should still avoid him for this year. And although Williams did record a career high in touches, he still finished with a career low in yards per carry and yards per touch as the RB 34 in points per game. You got no value on him if drafting him in ADP whatsoever. And that, again, is what I feel like is happening with Nick Chubb as a top 30 back right now in both best ball and season-long leagues. Because if we think Chubb won't be efficient this year, and then you step back and understand that he also hasn't recorded a double-digit target share in any season throughout his career, you have to ask, what are you getting? Like, are you now just getting an early down grinder who isn't the explosive back he's been in the past, who may even be like another year removed, if not done for his career, and being that explosive player? I think so. So Nick Chubb, to me, at his current ADP, is one that I just won't have any of, despite it continuing to increase.
Do you think his ADP will eclipse Kenneth Walker?
It could get to that range. I don't think it's going to get over him, but if he is starting to get drafted around David Montgomery and James Conner.
Can you imagine, like, I could have Kenneth Walker in his prime, or I could have post-prime Kenneth Walker, post-ACL, still in recovery mode Kenneth Walker? Because I think of these two players as being very similar.
I bet people start making the argument of getting him to the early down roles and range that David Montgomery and James Conner are in, around the RB20 through RB24. But even then, at least we can argue for the elite upside of both the Lions and Cardinals offenses, where we still have so many question marks. And I'm in, by the way, on the Browns as lower end late round stacks to target the return of Deshaun Watson, but Cardinals and Lions still very much elite.
So you think Deshaun Watson will be back this year?
I do think Deshaun Watson will be back this year, and one of only two quarterbacks, I should say, being drafted in that QB2 range, who's averaged over 3 rushing points per game in his career.
That's right. And I'm still drafting Jerome Ford. Just all the more Jerome Ford for me.
The floor so much more elongated for Jerome Ford.
Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program. The man from Evan Silva's basement. He's been around the fantasy world and back again. Now we've established the run. Here with me today, a mainstay of this network, this program, John Daigle.
How can you not get hyped from that intro and that song? It's impossible.
I really went for it.
I think you landed it. Not just went for it, you landed it.
I think that was potentially one of my best, if not my best introduction ever. That's because I had a dud last week. I had to restart. And this week I was like, not going to happen. I was playing it out in my head a little bit. I had a little bit of a little extra little juice going just in my mind's eye. I could see the whole presentation playing out in front of me. And I told myself, I'm really going to hit that first note, that John. I've been kind of easing into the name lately, and I've noticed I was a little bit lazy in post-production. I'm like, I'm getting a little soft. And then so I try to hit the J in John and then go rate it. And then so it was like, if you go back and listen to that, I think you're going to see that I was a 10 out of 10 the entire way.
It did seem like you were the third Buffer brother. You were very ready to announce that on the spot.
It felt good. It felt really good. Hey, Jason Allwine, he of the Wake and Take program. Thank you, Jason. Said that was epic. I appreciate that very much. He knows things. This guy's been broadcasting every day for many months, now years, and his game has been just leveling up consistently. So, John, you drafting any running backs in the first round this year? Let's just get right into it.
In the top 6 picks, yes. I still think Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, totally fine there. But in the back of the first round, which is objectively...
You're sure about Breece Hall?
I am sure about Breece Hall. If he can come off of injury and still be a top 4 running back in points per game with any other quarterback but Aaron Rodgers, I would imagine 1 year removed from that injury, and with Aaron Rodgers, hopefully for the full season, that yes, he can compete as a top 3 running back. I would like to say I'm sure about that.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that
interesting.
The NFL believes he's an every down player. I haven't seen evidence of that yet. I've seen one game. Excuse me. 1 game. 37 carries. There was one game. We can all look back and I'm like, hey, he had that 37 carry game. But until that point, there was always this idea that he was more of a satellite back plus, more of an Alvin Kamara, as opposed to a Christian McCaffrey or a LaDainian Tomlinson in terms of NFL role. And then they go out and they draft Braylon Allen, and that does not dissuade me of this possibility that the NFL believes that he is a 60% opportunity share player, and you really need to be getting up into that 80% opportunity share zone if you want to be a first-round pick in fantasy football. I think Bijan's going to be there. I think Bijan's going to be the RB1 this year. And Christian McCaffrey will be there until he gets hurt. Bijan, I'm not sure about. Breece Hall, I'm not sure about.
And if you don't believe in Breece Hall, then that means you're not taking any of the other guys, right?
No.
Because the next tier of running backs is where all the red flags are laid out.
All the red flags are laid out. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. It's basically Bijan, because it's hard for me to get Christian McCaffrey. At the 101, when I'm portfolio drafting on Underdog, for example, I will certainly get me some Christian McCaffrey at the 101, so I have some McCaffrey. He can always beat you. The guy's a 30 fantasy points per game player in his career, so you can't not draft him. You have to draft him when you can. So get your hands on some McCaffrey here and there. I'll probably, well underweight, 4 or 5% McCaffrey, less of that even with Breece Hall. I don't see the lead running back for the Jets being able to hurt me the way the lead running back for the 49ers can hurt me. Bijan, absolutely. So be overweight on Bijan, and then really not interested in running backs until Rachaad White.
Even in the back of the first round, and that's when everyone's usually taking Jahmyr Gibbs, that's questionable too, since in those 10 games post-bye, when both Montgomery and Gibbs returned and played together, the postseason included, Dave Montgomery actually totaled 10 more touches than Gibbs. They were just a committee backfield. And although I'm trying to build every draft around second round Devon Achane, that is the player I want in literally every league this year, I feel like I'm too biased to then take Achane in the first, second round turn, because again, that's an explosive back in a committee. If I'm making that argument against Gibbs, I have to step back and make that argument against Achane as well. So I'm giving what the board gives me in the back of the first this year, and I'm just double tapping wide receiver and avoiding the running backs.
You got to do it. You're going to get a lot of A.J. Brown, and you're going to be happy with it. You're going to be very happy with A.J. Brown.
Marvin Harrison, Drake London, Chris Olave, even though it's a little bit of a reach, you'd be much more happier doing that than reaching on Saquon, JT, Derrick Henry, the list goes on.
Drake London's interesting. And when we talk about Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, David Montgomery, Tyler Algier, these are very similar teams. It struck me. One day I was like, these two teams are the most similar offenses I can remember. If Drake London can step up and be that target magnet, then Falcons and Lions are like mirror image offenses. It's crazy.
And London's the one who everyone is not baking that into his ADP. They're at least fearful of it as a first, second round player, when in 2025, I think we are looking at Drake London in the AJ Brown, Puka Nacua range, which is why I'm trying to be ahead of it. We know Arthur Smith the past few years with the Falcons, literally dead last in the league in 3 wide sets. We're going to get that a lot more from Zach Robinson, just like Kevin O'Connell, who came from Sean McVay's coaching tree. So Kirk Cousins also, in playing under O'Connell, is already experienced with the Falcons playbook under Robinson. Not only that, but although the results have not been there for London, he's actually 14th the last 2 years in target per route run rate among every single wide receiver. The issue is that Desmond Ridder has been has had the 6th highest uncatchable pass rate in that time. Desmond Ridder, as we know, terrible quarterback, was not accurate in getting the ball to Drake London, although London has earned his targets the entire way. So if we're now all of a sudden getting accurate targets from Kirk Cousins with more volume, again, that makes Drake London as a first-round player in 2025, and I want to treat 2024 drafts like he's a value.
So, why not? What about Garrett Wilson? Garrett Wilson's there.
And Garrett Wilson, as we know, had to deal with Tim Boyle, Trevor Siemian, and Zach Wilson last year after Aaron Rodgers got injured on those first 2 snaps. So we do believe Garrett Wilson, unlike Terry McLaurin, right, who's been fighting this for now 6-7 years of his career, we believe Garrett Wilson is an elite talent who can be a top 10 12 wide receiver in points per game, pending on Aaron Rodgers' health. So Garrett Wilson also put him in that first, second round turn because he has more upside, in my opinion, than the running backs being taken there.
Of all the receivers in that zone, the funny thing is the guy that was the most productive last year is the last guy I'm drafting. Right? I'm going to draft the guy that has the efficiency, whose opportunity is about to explode with higher pass volume in Atlanta, much more accurate passes in New York. Give me Garrett Wilson. Give me Drake London. Puka Nacua. I'm out. Because that was last year. I'm not drafting for last year. See, the thing is, how it works is I'm drafting for this year. And the Falcons look like this year's Lions, but they're not priced at the same level. That's why I'm more apt to go with a Pitts than I am a Laporta. Do you have more Pitts or do you have more Laporta?
Oh, it's Pitts. It's not even close.
Yeah, right?
It's micro takes and the overall construction of how drafts work this year. Like Laporta and Kelsey, I'm not getting much of because they are literally 30 and 32 in ADP right now. Whereas Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, and Kyle Pitts, they are going 1-2 rounds later. So I don't need to reach in the Laporta Kelsey range. I can still get an hero RB or elite wide receiver there, arguably as my wide receiver too. And then I can wait and still get an elite tight end by attacking the next tier of guys. So I've instead been getting a lot more Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts as opposed to any Laporta. And the micro take, by the way, remember, there were 123 players who had 10 red zone targets last year. And Laporta converted the highest rate, 41% of those targets, into touchdowns. It's just unsustainable what he did in terms of getting into the end zone. So I'm betting that comes back and regresses to the mean.
Micro take?
Micro take.
You're saying micro take, but then the take that you're offering is full size. These are full size takes. These are great takes. Why are you calling it a micro take?
The micro outlook, I should say. How about that? Even though it's not micro.
These are great takes, man. Don't discount the takes. These are you're underselling the take, man. But I do love the term micro take. I'm going to steal that term. I love stealing terms, stealing like an artist. I'm trying to find a way to make it my own. I'm gonna play with this. I'm going to workshop this micro take. I'm going to turn it into something else that is Podfather specific. But I love where you're going with this idea, this whole concept, the micro take concept. I'm loving I'm picking up what you're laying down, John.
It's all yours.
What you're laying down.
We share here on your show. Once a year, we get to share.
So the news that I'm hearing is that the offense, according to the Rams beat reporters, still shockingly, after he was the greatest fantasy receiver ever, shocking that the offense still running through Cooper Kupp when he's healthy. I'm shocked. Shocked, John.
And last year, it is interesting how the Rams offense parsed in those last 7 games. Whenever I know it's weird to be talking about Demarcus Robinson among players like Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, but in those last 7 games, whenever Robinson overthrew Tutu Atwell in 3 wide sets, McVay leans on 3 wide sets as his base personnel. That's when Nacua had only, quote unquote, only 25.5% target share to Cooper Kupp's 24.2%. That's negligent difference. And yet Nakua's going at the end of the first round and now injured for 4 to 6 weeks, right? We don't even know his week 1 status yet. Whereas Cooper Kupp, everyone's upset about drafting him. And by the way, I was someone, admittedly, who was still drafting him incorrectly in the first round. He was injured. By the time we got to high stakes draft opening week, he was then a 4th, 5th round player, and you got the wide receiver 24 in points per game in return. There's nothing wrong with that. He didn't win your league, but he didn't hurt you either. If you drafted him in the first round like I did in late August, then yes, that maybe hurt you a little. Didn't kill you. You could have survived, but it hurt. So as where he's being drafted now, the wide receiver 20 through 24, you're not only getting an easy return on your value, you're not baking in the fact that he was still a first-round player last year. It's arguably a discount. So at that ADP...
Cooper Kupp is a discount this year.
At ADP, you should be drafting Cooper Kupp, knowing that you're still getting his floor at that range, and it's okay.
And this was the take. The crime is when I saw the Puka Nacua knee injury, I was like, oh, no, not like this.
Yeah.
Not like this. Not like this. We're fading him from the beginning of draft season. And now, of course, you're fading him because you don't want to draft injured players when you can draft healthy players. And this injury hopium, this injury recovery hopium that is constant right? Because the coaches start it by lying about the recovery timeline, and then the beat reporters just regurgitate it, and then the fantasy analysts print it, and then it becomes, this is what's happening. He's coming back in 4 weeks. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's not gonna. I get a spoiler alert for everybody. we got a big time spoiler alert. Shh! Spoiler alert. Puka Nacua is not playing week 1. I mean, come on. Give me a break. Why? How could you even stop it? Just enough. So that then the Cooper Kupp ADP has not risen enough yet, because that has not yet been baked in. That has not yet been fully realized. Where could he be? Where do you think Cooper Kupp could be drafted in 2 weeks?
I would hope he reaches the Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Brandon Aiyuk second, third round turn range. Like, that's where he should be going. That makes a lot more sense. Unfortunately for Puka, I would hope we get a dip on him, but the way best ball brains work, I don't think it's going to happen because everyone still at the back of the first round is going to take that week 17 correlation against the Cardinals and just double tap Marvin Harrison Jr. and Puka in that range rather than factoring in any kind of injury for Puka.
You know who I'm drafting, who is, I believe, the same guy, right? We haven't seen it yet from Garrett Wilson. He hasn't been a wide receiver 1 in fantasy yet. We haven't seen it yet from Drake London. Well, because he was in college, we haven't seen it yet from Malik Nabers. But you have to explain to me, John, explain to me like I'm 5 years old. Please, can you do this? Explain to me like I'm 5, the difference between Garrett Wilson and Malik Nabers. What?
I honestly, until I've heard you say something like this, and I will let you know, you're the first person to mention that Nabers is just arbitrage Garrett Wilson. Yeah. And I love that thought process about the quarterbacking, the offense, but still the very elite player who had a 27% target share at 19 years old in college. Not only that, but split his time in college from both the boundary and out wide, which is how those guys stay on the field because you can't take them off the field. He's not just a slot receiver. I love that take. And that's why I wrote the Giants preview to establish the run. And I even mentioned I would much rather reach for Malik Nabers. This is the quote. I would rather reach for Malik Nabers in the 3rd round rather than losing him in the 4th round, because that's where he's going to home leagues right now. So I'm with you. I'm 12 picks ahead of ADP on Malik Nabers, who should be in that, again, Jalen Waddle secondary receiver tier alongside Deebo Samuel.
Okay, so here are my guys. The social media team at Player Profiler, they want my guys, and I gave them a guy for every round. I said 3rd round, Malik Nabers. 4th round, Rachaad White. 5th round, Dalton Kincaid. A tight end in that tier you talked about.
Yep.
Elite tight ends at a discount. That's what we're talking about. Rashee Rice, round 6. And then late round, Blake Corum, your league-winning running back rounds. What do you think of my guys?
The only one I would push back against, unfortunately, is someone you've already mentioned twice this show, is Rachaad White. And it's just because I haven't been drafting running backs in that range. Because of the way ADP works. And that is that in that range, elite quarterbacks and elite tight ends are going there. That's why I have no problem with Dalton Kincaid. He is Mark Andrews, McBride, Kyle Pitts. He's just those guys. George Kittle even though George Kittle's being left for dead 2 rounds later, which makes 0 sense. Given that the last 2 years, no one has more top 5 or overall tight end 1 finishes, Travis Kelce included, than George Kittle. And he may lose Brandon Aiyuk in the next couple of weeks. So still love George Kittle at cost. White, though.
He may lose Brandon Aiyuk?
As in, Brandon Aiyuk may get traded. I don't know if you've heard everything.
I know, but I mean, I've heard, I've seen the smoke. Of course I've seen the smoke billowing, John. But what? They're going for a Super Bowl. In the history of the NFL, I've never seen a team in this situation trade an asset, a critical piece of the offense at this point. I can't imagine it. I can't even get my head. I can't conceptualize it.
That was sarcastic, by the way, because obviously everyone living under a rock even has heard about Brandon Aiyuk reports in every direction in the league. I'm with you. I don't think he's traded, personally.
They're just trying to win a Super Bowl.
Especially
when
the trade packages are reportedly Kendrick Bourne doesn't make sense on his contract. Amari Cooper definitely does not make sense on his contract. And if Cooper Kupp were to come back, Cooper Kupp is also due for an extension coming up. So why would the 49ers trade a receiver who needs an extension for another who needs more money? It doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm with you. I don't think Aiyuk is traded. The fact is George Kittle's going too low. Rachaad White, though, the argument is that last year, 8th or 9th round pick made sense past the running back dead zone, and he's an elite athlete who had no competition with pass-catching chops. This year, he's being drafted as the RB12, RB13 off the board, and maybe a little more competition in Bucky Irving, and he's being drafted arguably at his ceiling since he only got there based on the workload. He wasn't efficient. He was still the same player, very bad at running the ball between the tackles, but he had the workload. And I try to remove players solely in that range, rounds 3 through 5, running backs in particular, who just have the workload, and that's the argument we're making for them. This includes Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. So me personally, just not taking running backs there.
Well, Saquon Barkley and Rachaad White are electric talents, and they've been trapped on teams with horrific offensive lines. Now, the offensive line in New York has just been bad overall. They've just been inefficient and, injured and, sub-talents up and down the unit. Tampa just happened to be ravaged by injury, unlike any other offensive line in football last year. But Tampa actually has the most offensive continuity of any offense from 2023 to 2024. Bucky Irving was a straight-up scat back in college. It just happened to be tethered to the check-down quarterback of all of college football. One of the great check-down quarterbacks in the history, at least in the history of the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't believe that Bucky Irving is any kind of upgrade. Rachaad White's still superior to Bucky Irving in every way. Rachaad White is explosive, and I believe you're going to see for the first time, he's only in his 3rd year, we have not yet given him a full season with any kind of quality offensive line. His elusiveness has been good enough. His explosiveness is evident. So I think it's still early to classify Rachaad White as an inefficient runner. Certainly not an inefficient player. One of the most efficient receivers out of the backfield. So that's my case for Rachaad White. And if you've piled into receiver, then you can absolutely afford to draft Rachaad White in the 4th round. If you're starting receiver, it's those builds where I'm very comfortable drafting Rachaad White as my hero RB, knowing I can get a Dalton Kincaid or a Kyle Pitts potentially in the 5th round. And then in these teams, I'm very happy with my roster. Right? When I look back, I think, yeah, it's not the best round to be drafting a running back typically. I know that. But you also just can't have a 100% like static rules-based drafting cadence. You have to actually analyze the players that are available in those particular rounds because there's exceptions. Every year, there's a guy in the dead zone. There's a guy in the round 4. Like last year, I liked Travis Etienne in round 4. Right? For a lot of the same reasons I like Rachaad White this year, I liked Travis Etienne last year. And that didn't hurt me. In fact, he faded, but then he also came back with a monster game in week 17, I believe.
And speaking of stealing phrases from each other, you coined, I don't hate players, I hate ADPs, and I still use that to this day. And so, like you, Rachaad White dips, Josh Jacobs, who I'm vehement in not drafting, if he dips, I've taken a couple shares as well. I've gotten Saquon Barkley mid-3rd round on Underdog sometimes. I'll gladly take that. It literally just comes down to ADPs for me. I'm not opposed to any player at the right cost.
I mean, yeah, Saquon and Rachaad White. Saquon slips, I'm in.
Sure.
Right? I'm in. I mean, because for so many years, we're just like, what if? Right? This happens all the time in sports. What if player X gets a big situation upgrade? What if? Then what inevitably happens is it happens, right? It occurs. The upgrade, he goes to the Eagles, which would normally be, but then there's this narrative about the tush push, and that's going to wipe out all of his touchdown equity. And it's like, wait, what? This was the dream for 5 years. The dream comes true, and you're not interested. And it's a shoulder shrug. I mean, this is so sports. So what's happened with Saquon's ADP is so sports. That's why I'm happy to draft him. In fact, I mean, he would be the other running back drafted in the top 50 that I am comfortable with that we haven't mentioned yet. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
And in home leagues, he's going at the first, second round turn, which again is why I'm instead promoting wide receiver there, because 13-14 seems pretty rich, since I'm still questioning the touchdown upside. Behind the best offensive line of his career, yes, but I'm still someone questioning the touchdown upside.
I love him because he has upside, right? Like, he could be the RB1. If things break his way, then he becomes the RB1. I mean, what if Jalen Hurts goes down? Okay, and what if the tush push is no longer an option? Then what happens? Right, that's still a much better offense than anything he had in New York. Right? And the offense would run through him.
They would have to hide Kenny Pickett, so of course the offense would run through him. Yeah,
I mean, there's just a lot of ways in a tournament play that pushing the button on a Saquon Barkley makes a lot of sense. Like, Best Ball Mania makes more sense to go Barkley than it does to draft Barkley in some traditional league with your buddies, is what you're saying.
Sure.
And I'm on board. I'm on board. And if the offensive line in Tampa takes a big step forward this year, and that's where that's the one place they invested. They brought in the new personnel to bolster the offensive line. They gave the huge extension to Tristan Wirfs, well deserved. That's where you could see some real upside. You led off talking about when I'm drafting a running back, I'm looking for what is his activity in the passing game. Mm-hmm. And that's what Saquon gives you. That's what Rachaad White gives you. Now, talk about beat reporters and how they are essentially carrying the water for the coaches. They are, propagandists, team propagandists, NFL propagandists. I found it interesting how the beat reporters in Denver have been super dismissive of Javonte Williams, and then Sean Payton comes out and takes the exact opposite approach and position. They said, "Oh no, Javonte's much better than he was last year. He's back. We're excited." It's like, wait a second. So how are you evaluating Javonte Williams?
I'm actually hedging my bets with Javonte Williams because, on one hand, if you had to pick one running back to come out of this backfield that was an RB1, RB2 all year long, it has to be Javonte, given the profiles of everyone else. Like, as much as I like Audric Estime as a player, we have to question his pass-catching role.
Well, you like Audric Estime as a player?
I think he's a fine early down bruiser. Yeah.
Okay.
I think he has a role in the NFL, but he obviously he obviously won't catch passes. And it's reverse for Jaleel McLaughlin, who I love, but I have to question him as an early down runner since he really only showed last year he's slippery in the passing game and can earn targets. Led his position in target per route run rate. So, of course, I want to get some McLaughlin on my team as well. But Javonte, someone who can do all three downs, he's the pick there, in my opinion. So I'm still drafting him, especially 1 year removed. And the fact, as I mentioned earlier, he got a career high in touches, run into the ground despite coming off injury. Sean Payton didn't care at all. So maybe Payton just doesn't care at all yet again and rides him till the very end. But I will still hedge in the later rounds because McLaughlin's still my pick there as someone who could still lead the team in carries if it goes wrong for Williams. Again, it's a political answer, but I'm just hedging my bets.
It's not a political. I see what you did because I said propaganda. You said a political answer. No, Jaleel McLaughlin, he's another great best ball running back. That's why if I'm going to go like a running back relatively early, especially in a best ball tournament, a Saquon, we talked about Bijan Robinson earlier, you can wait rounds and rounds. You get your one hero, and then you could draft guys like a Jaleel McLaughlin where they're going to break long runs. They're going to have weeks. They're going to be 20-point weeks, but it's going to depend on the game flow. It's just going to depend on the situation. It's going to depend on the matchup. It's going to depend on the linebacking core they're facing. There's so many different things, the dependencies, that will determine whether or not a Jaleel McLaughlin, even a Devon Achane, right? Will this guy give me the spike week that I want? Will Achane give me the 30-point week? Will McLaughlin give me that 20-point week? We don't know, right? We're going to do DFS analysis every week, start sits every week, and we're going to talk about it every week, these matchups. But we're not going to know for sure, especially with these explosive running backs. We're not sure exactly how it's going to go. That's why as much as I like a Jaleel McLaughlin, if it's a managed league and I have to decide, am I starting Jaleel McLaughlin every week? Just remember, before you push the button on a guy like that, think it through. Okay, it's week 4. What am I going to do? Do I want to put myself in that situation where it's much easier if it's a Roschon Johnson type player, where if DeAndre Swift is not an option that week, then you're riding with Roschon. It's an easy start. No matter what happens to Javonte Williams or Samaje Perine or anybody in Denver, you're never sure with McLaughlin. What about Estime? Right? What about Perine? You're never going to know, man. You're never going to know. So even when things break right, even if you hit your flush, even if you hit your straight on the river, depending on the board, you're like, well, I'm still not sure. I still got to check the river. God damn it. Right? So that's the problem, is you're always looking at a check on the river with a guy like McLaughlin, whereas if you peel your card on the river with a Roschon Johnson or a proper every down running back, a Blake Corum, then you're all in. You can push. It's
running back Gabe Davis, in that you can't just cite his points per game, because that does not tell the whole story of the start-sit decisions everyone had to make with them, because you couldn't pinpoint his production. You should always take into account the start-sit headaches in redraft leagues, always.
I would rather make a decision on Jaleel McLaughlin than a Gabe Davis. I mean, as challenging as these satellite backs are, at least there is a reception floor most weeks. Yeah. With these ancillary receivers, these number 2, number 3 receivers, oh my God. I mean, agonizing. I mean, the agonizing decisions you have to, oh my God. We'll talk about it later, about, late round receivers, but my God, I hate those decisions. In fact, my strategy in managed leagues, it's one of the reasons why I'm so wide receiver heavy early, is because I know that it allows me to avoid and sidestep some of those decisions that are impossible. Like, I don't even want to be drafting a receiver in round 12. I don't even want to do it. Get him out of my face. Get out of here. Right? At least if I'm going to go like a mid to late round receiver, if it's a Ladd McConkey, I can feel pretty confident in a particular target share, given that, who are the other options? Quentin Johnston, Josh Palmer. I can feel pretty good about it. But once you get past McConkey, maybe you could say Khalil Shakir and feel pretty confident about the target share. But even then, it really starts to erode after that. You get to a guy like Darnell Mooney. Love you, buddy. But you're a best ball receiver. That's what you are. They have that term for a reason.
Funny you mentioned Shakir, because he's the one who I know his ADP is around that McConkey range, but Shakir's only run 24 career routes and 2 wide sets. He just can't come on the field so far whenever they are not playing 3 wide receivers. I mean,
they had Diggs. Come on, they had Gabe Day. That was a totally different team.
Keon Coleman, we'll see what he can do in Buffalo.
Come on. You're really giving Keon Coleman a lot of credit.
It's not really giving him credit.
I mean, to fade Shakir based on his personnel usage in the last couple of years, he's now a third-year receiver. They've turned over the wide receiver core 100%. They're going to be playing a lot of 12 personnel. There, of course, he's going to be on the field. You're assuming a lot of Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman if you're thinking they're going to pull Shakir off the field just based on previous personnel groupings, which were only designed that way because they had Diggs.
I hope he can get on the field in 2 wide sets. I would hope so. It's me, not even Coleman, by the way. It's me putting more stock into how Joe Brady's going to use Curtis Samuel as around the field in that offense. Given that the offense played like underneath, not over the top, whenever Joe Brady took over, and just utilizing running back and targets near closer to the line of scrimmage last year.
So you're drafting, you like Samuel more?
I like Samuel a lot more. Yeah.
At ADP. That makes sense. I get it. I listen, we can follow this breadcrumb trail. You know where it leads, right? These target breadcrumbs, where they lead always. The all roads lead to Dalton Kincaid, really. This conversation always inevitably leads to you just got to draft Kincaid. That's where where it goes.
I would assume he is. I would hope he's used as he was in the last month, whenever he led every tight end in depth of target as a downfield receiver. Because in those before wrist surgery, Dawson Knox underwent, he was used like Jackson Smith and Jigba, Kincaid was, where he had literally a 2.9 yard depth of target. Just dinky targets that did not result in any ceiling performances. You had to remove Knox to learn what Kincaid was, and I have my fingers crossed it carries over.
It will. They have a full off season where he's participating in the whole program, all of training camp. They drafted him in the first round. This is one of the more clear and obvious unlock seasons for a tight end I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. I mean, come on. Marvin Mims. Unlock season for Marvin Mims.
I don't have a hard stance for you because, of course, if we could guarantee Marvin Mims would actually be on the field under Sean Payton, even though last year he proved he could be on the field and Payton would not let him be, then I would gladly take Marvin Mims in every draft. And I still am in best ball, especially because Mims recorded 22 catches last year and 16 of them gained at least 5 yards. Whenever he touched the ball, he made downs easier to convert for an entire offense single-handedly. It's just the fact that in Sean Payton going out and getting Josh Reynolds to a respectable contract and drafting Troy Franklin, regardless of what I think about Franklin's talent, still added him in the first round of day 3, the 4th round overall. I don't know if Mims is going to get on the field under Payton. I would hope so.
No one has that's pure propaganda right there, referring to the 4th round as the first round
of day 3.
The first round of day. That's beautiful. That's beautiful propaganda.
That is straight propaganda. Yeah.
Marvin Mims is good. Marvin Mims is good at football. That's it. That's what I like. Late round receivers in best ball. I love Darnell Mooney because I know he's good at football. I love Marvin Mims. I know he's good at football. Give me a few more guys. Would you consider Marvin Mims and Mooney in your top 5 of late round best ball receivers?
Absolutely. Darnell Mooney's actually, I think, my favorite among the bunch because he's never coming off the field. Like, only Calvin Ridley received more guaranteed cash in free agency than Mooney. And throughout his rookie contract, Justin Fields, since he was drafted, has literally averaged the league's highest rated of uncatchable passes. Again, we're going to a more accurate quarterback with passing volume. Cousins and Zach Robinson. So Mooney, very easily an every down wide receiver. Best ball and redraft, by the way. I like taking chances on Jalen Tolbert as well. Still a 3rd round player in 2022. Yeah. Also known as the 2nd round of day 2 for propaganda purposes.
Yes.
And he's a bet against 31-year-old Brandon Cooks, who scored all 10 of his touchdowns in the end zone on end zone targets. And Brandon Cooks, literally for the rest of his career, 9 seasons in the league, had never earned double-digit end zone targets. He's a deep play guy. He's not a red zone guy. And so it's just a bet against an anomaly season for an aging receiver like Cook. So deep shot on Jalen Tolbert. Another one who's catching a lot.
Can I explain to you the football reasons why Jalen Tolbert's interesting?
Let's do it.
Jalen Tolbert was a monster producer at a small school.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say Alabama State, something like that. But the offense they ran was fairly rudimentary, right? And so he didn't understand a lot of the concepts, the professional concepts, and it was a big challenge for him. And all of the people behind the scenes, what I've heard is this was a big light come on year. Like and it makes sense. There's a reason why small school players take longer to develop. It's partly because they tend to get drafted later and they get noticed later by coaches and they just earn opportunities at a slower rate. I mean, look at Adam Thielen and how many years it took from Minnesota State to finally he was in Minnesota and still they didn't respect him for many years. And he was undeniable. So it takes longer for these guys, but also it's picking up the playbook, it's understanding the nuances, it's understanding the jargon, knowing where to be, especially in these timing-based offenses. So now the light has come on with Jalen Tolbert that, okay, it's third year or bust. You got to give him a chance, right? If this was a first-round player, this was a N'Keal Harry, this was a Jameson Williams, you burn 2 years, you don't get that third year of benefit of the doubt from me. But if it's someone like in the Jalen Tolbert situation, absolutely I'm giving you that extra year of doubt.
It was also considered a knock against him as a rookie that he couldn't get playing time over Noah Brown. But then come to find out, Noah Brown was, at least in fantasy, literally a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, whenever injuries happened in front of him. Noah Brown was actually very productive from C.J. Stroud. So
yeah,
Noah
because
Brown
he was also at Ohio State.
True too. Yes.
He was at Ohio State, so he understood the Ohio State system, and that's a little bit more of a modern offense. So he's a little more plug and play when he gets into the league. So it just makes sense. Some of these things just make sense. They make intuitive sense once you say them out loud. And you're like, oh, yeah, I guess that would make sense. It's like, yeah, man, like some guys deserve a little bit of benefit of the doubt because what you will hear is that he is a very hard worker. He went to South Alabama and that he is working at it. And his best comparable player on Player Profiler is Adam Thielen.
Interesting. Wide open target tree. No running backs to lean on the running game. It's all still Dak Prescott, who just finished number 2 in MVP voting, by the way.
He's good. Hey, I love the call. Some people, they'll look at the stats for the last 2 years and they'll be too embarrassed to even mention this guy on a podcast. Not John Daigle. Give us one more guy.
He's becoming steamed up the board, but as we're speaking right now, there's still a large difference between the ADP of Jermaine Burton and Andre Yoshivas. And that's the one I'm mentioning here. And I like Burton as a prospect. Curious of your thoughts on him because he does seem like the rich man's Jalen Hyatt for best ball and just having more spike weeks, assuming he can play. But right now, Yoshivas is the one playing in the slot and out wide. He's getting a lot of reps in camp with the first string offense. And in the 4 games T. Higgins or Jamar Chase missed last year, Yoshivas actually led the team in red zone targets, which makes sense at 6'3", 205 pounds. So I still like Yoshivas in the last round.
It's hard to play in the NFL. It's even harder to play without any experience. So if Yoshivas comes in with experience, he has both experience in camp, experience with the playbook, but experience actually playing. Experience with Joe Burrow, experience going up against NFL corners in real life, in game situations. So it just makes sense. As much as we want these rookies to perform, and Jermaine Burton, certainly a lot of sex appeal, but it's not like there was ever a reputation that Jermaine Burton was a guy that was spending extra time after practice, that he was spending extra time with the playbook. That's never been Jermaine Burton. So he has a bit of a steeper hill to climb than some other guys that are coming into the league with a little more of a chip on their shoulder. You know, he's always felt like, you know, with my talent profile, this should all just come easy to me. And receivers especially learn right away that no, actually no. And so I don't think he's going to produce at all this year. And then it's going to be a big question of, are we going to see the Burton that we saw in college? And he's just going to fade out? Like it's just going to be a slow fade out of the league? That's probably what's going to happen, John. I mean, this is most players, right? Think about a guy like Jalen Strong. Like these are the kinds of you know, third round player, you know, super explosive. You know, I had these big splashy weeks at Arizona State. Get to the league, feel entitled, and then they're out in a few years. And then the guys like Yashovis, those are the guys. Yashovis was going to stick around. That's what happens, right? It's a beautiful thing, man. Like I said, I've said this in many podcasts, but 10 years ago, I would have been all in on Burton. And I've seen enough, where it's the explosive player gets eaten alive by the hungry player, the player with attention to detail moving up the depth chart. It happens way more than I would have ever imagined until I was in it full time like I am now.
And it seems like the one earning reps right now is the one who's going less drafted than Jermaine Burton.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so that's a great one. And a guy I like is Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson, he was not a sexy player. He's also a third-round pick, similar draft capital to Jalen Tolbert. But he went to Stanford. He was at a major conference program, and he is in the ideal situation. I mean, because Marvin Harrison has a lot to prove, and I'm sure Marvin Harrison's going to have big weeks, but Marvin Harrison is a rookie, so he's not going to have the target share of Malik Nabers even this year. So there's room there for that third option, you know, after Harrison and after McBride. Who is that third option going to be? All the reports say it's going to be Wilson. Look at his talent profile. Look at his athleticism. You look at his per-game production in college on Player Profiler. Everything I'm seeing says Wilson.
I like Michael Wilson as well. The only concern would be whenever Kyler Murray returned from week 10 on, the Cardinals actually tied the 49ers for the league's highest rate of 10-yard runs. They became, under Drew Petzing, who I do think is the next great OC to turn head coach, ahead of Bobby Slowick and Frank Smith even, they became one of the league's best running offenses. And it's because Petzing can scheme it up similar to an Arthur Smith against stacked boxes as well. So they can do everything. And then you have to question, are there too many mouths to feed, including the running backs? Having said that, in best ball,
James
as a
Conner
and Trey Benson. Benson, who I don't think has a standalone value until Connor's injured. But we also know that's going to happen.
Look at this. Look at this. Look at this ADP. Just in the last week, Michael Wilson's up more than a round on Underdog. That's on Player Profiler. Check that out.
And wide receiver 73 is still very, very, very palatable.
Now, I have 10 burning questions. 10 burning questions for John Daigle. And speaking of Underdog, I have more thoughts on Underdog right now. This episode is made possible by Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog Fantasy is the leader in best ball. When you go to join an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft, it fills very quickly, especially now. It's Best Ball Mania season, baby! Best Ball Mania 5! I can't believe they're at Best Ball Mania 5 already. $15 million in prizes. They're giving out $15 million with $1.5 million to first. Playing in best ball leagues makes you better. It helps train you on player value and strategy. And Underdog offers a lot more than just best ball contests. They offer pick'ems. My new favorite, the golf pick'ems. Baseball pick'ems going on throughout the offseason. Hit the pick'ems, back to best ball, hit the pick'ems. So use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250 So they've increased the maximum deposit bonus. It was $100. Now it's up to $125. When you get the Underdog app, use promo code Underworld and go draft your ass off. 10 burning questions from a man, John Daigle. We didn't mention Dontavian Wicks. We didn't mention him, John. Why not?
I don't
know
why not.
Everyone else is mentioning him.
Maybe because everyone already knows about him since they're mentioning him. He's the worst sleeper because everyone knows about him. Everyone's going to be racing to draft him, and that's okay. I also have been drafting a lot of Dontavian Wicks, but there are still a lot of mouths to feed in Green Bay. And we are listening to camp reports, and we have no idea who's playing in this rotation among 4 or even 5 wide receivers if you want to include Bo Melton.
I include Bo Melton.
Sure.
The reason I'm not in on Wicks is because I'm in on Melton.
Okay.
That's it. Bo Melton looks to me to be the second best wide receiver after, Jaden Reed. I'm going Jaden Reed is a phenomenal talent. Jaden Reed is the second incarnation of Stephon Diggs. So I'm on board with drafting Jaden Reed at ADP. A lot of people say, hey, it's a reach because it's so ambiguous. No. I think it's ambiguous behind Reed. And I think Bo Melton, we could look up, and you're not allowed to be surprised. Bo Melton's second on this team in targets by the end of the year. It could absolutely happen. He was awesome at Rutgers. He was underappreciated in Seattle. This happens. 6th-round picks, it happens. As good as he is, if he's not getting enough looks in Seattle, they're not going to know what they have. You assume, they got a great look at him. They know what he could do in Seattle. You trust Seattle? You trust Seattle to give him enough look and even know what they're seeing when they're looking? I don't.
And although I'm drafting Christian Watson among that group as well, we also know he's in the worst coaching staff to trust an injured player because they have historically, and this goes back to Aaron Jones too, brought their injured players along slowly. And so that makes it so much harder for redraft leagues to trust Watson if he's still dealing with these chronic knee injury, hamstring injuries.
Better end of the draft receiver. Would you go Mechie or would you go Bo Melton?
Bo Melton by far.
Right. Okay.
Not close.
Not close. Okay. Bo Melton is, thank you.
Yes.
But Mechie's interesting. But Melton, no receiver in the final round of a best ball draft has more upside than Bo Melton.
I'm going through the Rolodex of last round receivers in my head right now. Considering I'm still drafting Jalen Tolbert and Alexander Madison, I agree. Maybe no last round player has more upside than Bo Melton.
I think Tolbert's right there with him.
I like Tolbert, but yes,
Bo
Melton's a good one.
Tolbert's right there with him. I like both those guys. They're great. We're on the same page with this. Can you think of a more busterific situation for a young running back than what's playing out with Kendre Miller?
I can't, and it sucks because I have so much May and June Kendre Miller, and now the fact that he can't even get on the field for the second camp in a row. Dennis Allen is coming out saying that in order to make a roster, you have to be on the field, which is really concerning for his rookie deal if it's also in question right now in New Orleans. So what's happened is that, yes, I think the initial reaction is to get on top of Jamal Williams in the last round. And at least we have the evidence of week 1 last year, whenever Alvin Kamara and Kendre were out, Jamal Williams got 20 touches. So he'll likely be a workhorse. But I think I've also, similar to your Rachaad White range, I think I've also increased my interest on Alvin Kamara due to the Kendre Miller injury.
Yes.
And before, I was not taking Kamara in that range at all. But now the fact you can get him in the 7th or 8th, a running back who averaged 7 targets per game, the highest target share, 18% of any running back in the league. And plus the guy we're taking in the last round, right, for all of Jamal Williams, what he can do as a workhorse, he still posted a career low 2.9 yards per carry last year behind Kamara. So I've instead gotten more interest in Kamara right now in drafts.
You're not drafting Jamal Williams in a managed league.
Absolutely not.
The upside is not there. The reason you would draft a Jamal Williams is your final running back in best ball. You're drafting him for those handful of games he goes for 2 touchdowns. Those are out there. He's going to have a couple games like that. That's why you're getting those games. You're getting it as a nice little floor play as your RB2 for some weeks. You're going to need him. You're going to be glad you had him. And he's very steady. He's going to be at least the second running back on an NFL depth chart all year, no matter what team he's on. And he's shown health, right? He's been a very steady producer, a great end of the draft floor play for all your best ball lineups that you're just short a running back. Why not Jamal Williams? Why not Chase Brown where he's going? Because his ADP is rising.
And now Chase Brown is going ahead of Zach Moss. At that price in best ball, I'm admittedly out on Brown and still taking on Moss, which I know is not the popular opinion at all. I get chastised anytime I say it. I had never heard of the term until I heard the great JJ Zachariason, friend of the show, of course, as well, mention survivorship bias, and I love it. And that's why I've been poaching it for shows, because it's just proof that those mid-range running backs are preferred to coaching staffs because they have elevated themselves across different coaching staffs. Like with the Bills, whenever Singletary was not around or shunned, Zach Moss got a workhorse workload. Last year with the Colts, whenever Jonathan Taylor was injured, Zach Moss got 100% of the team's touches. He's now been trusted by so many different individuals that you would have to imagine.
Thank you.
He's not only trusted by the Bengals coaching staff, that also goal line role, pass catching role, since the most important part of the Bengals running backs role is not running the ball. It's protecting Joe freaking Burrow. And there's no one that can do better than that on that team than Zach Moss. So I still draft Zach Moss, as unpopular as it may be, over Chase Brown every time.
As you should. And again, no team best illustrates my growth as an analyst over the last 10 years than the Bengals. Because I would have been Mr. Burton and Mr. Brown 10 years ago. Now I'm Mr. Ilisovas and Zach Moss.
Mm-hmm.
Because Zach Moss is going to be the primary back. That's, again, another spoiler alert. So how it works is when a player is proven through this survivorship bias to know what he's doing, understands the role, understands the playbook, there's no incentive to give them carries in these, preseason games or even running with the ones in certain scenarios during practice. If you're tracking the number of carries a player is getting with the ones, that's not necessarily indicative of who's going to be the starter.
Right.
What it tells you is this player needs reps. Of all the running backs in the league, the guy that has grown the most, or one of the running backs that has grown and evolved and developed the most, is Chase Brown. I believe that he has developed leaps and bounds since he was completely incompetent at the Senior Bowl. Okay? But he was starting at such a low level. He was starting at 0 for NFL competency. And they recognize that he's explosive and he wants to work. Like, he's showing up early. He wants to put the work in. And they're like, okay, you want to put the work in? Quid pro quo, Clarice. We'll give you the reps with the ones because we know you need to practice where to be, how to hit that hole, at what angle, how to pick up that blitzing linebacker. You're bad at all these things. We're going to help you get better by giving you more reps with the ones. That's why he's getting more reps with the ones, because he needs the practice. Zach Moss doesn't need the practice. Zach Moss he's chilling, knowing that he's going to be getting 15 plus carries in week 1.
I agree.
Yeah. So that's it. But you'll see that the jumping to conclusions based on the number of carries with the ones, that's sometimes, right? That can be a false flag. Who gets suspended first? Jordan Addison or Rashee Rice?
Addison or neither. And right now I'm leaning towards the latter.
Neither are getting suspended. That's fact.
I don't believe either are getting suspended this season at least.
That's right. Give us one more late round running back do you think is going to smash?
Let's go to Tyrone Tracy. Since we're on the topic of rookies and second-year players, right now we know that the lone year Tyrone Tracy played running back in college, he recorded the nation's fifth highest rate of 10-yard carries and averaged 4.4 yards after contact per attempt. Just a super explosive player. Not only that, but you talk about Chase Brown learning things on the fly, like how Chase Brown didn't play special teams at Illinois. Tracy had 17 kick returns in college, and his competition is Eric Gray. So I think Tracy is not only active for week 1 just for special teams alone. Again, he's going to be their RB2 and come down the stretch whenever they're changing this offense up, because Daniel Jones probably won't survive, especially since, remember, $23 million of Daniel Jones' $30 million cap hit last year is guaranteed for injury. I bet once they see the Daniel Jones experiment is not playing out, they have no choice but to bench him in the second month of the season and just move on. But they do at least want to see him with Malik Nabers at first. And so I guess we see Tracy in the second half of the season over Singletary.
I can give specific advice on this. In managed leagues, you don't need to draft Tracy because Eric Gray will outsnap him for the first 2 weeks.
Yes.
Pick up Tyrone Tracy after week 2. Just watch the snap counts. Week 2, week 3, pick up Tyrone Tracy. He's going to be one of those golden in-season pickups. I can tell you that right now. Okay. What is the games played breakdown between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields?
I'm going to give half a season each to both players.
Okay.
More importantly, with Justin Fields in the second half of the season, which is why he should be in best ball stacks over Russell Wilson, especially because the week 17 correlation is with the Chiefs. So you can play Patrick Mahomes and then have Justin Fields for that championship round correlation.
Okay, so you're like, oh, Podfather, you always bring up the Senior Bowl and you overweight the Senior Bowl. No, I don't. By being around football players and being around coaches, you pick up things that matter. Okay? And I was at the Senior Bowl with Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert. And I mean, who wasn't at that senior? Michael Pittman, right? Jordan Love. There was a lot of great players at that Senior Bowl. That was probably the best Senior Bowl. It was so clear and obvious that Justin Herbert was the best quarterback on the field. It wasn't even close. But, right, Jordan Love had an arm that was almost the equal of Justin Herbert. And in a lot of these drills, Jalen Hurts looked like the worst quarterback. He looked worse than the random guy from Colorado that was there. I don't remember his name. Okay, Martez or something. Montez.
Steven Montez.
Yeah, so the chat can check me. Steven Montez, is that a real person?
I believe that's a real person.
Okay,
yeah.
Chat, check us, please. Steven Montez is a real guy. But, yeah, so Jalen Hurts looked worse. In these throw-and-catch drills, because you remember that famous Pro Bowl where Lamar Jackson couldn't hit any target?
Yeah.
Not even close. There are certain contexts where certain quarterbacks will thrive and others won't. So standing still, hitting a target, some quarterbacks are great at that, some are not. Right? You know who's not great at that? Justin Fields. That's not it. So what happens is in camp, in the early days, when you're just pitching and catching and you're just doing one-on-one drills, of course, Russell Wilson's going to look far superior. And what ends up happening is once you start going to 7-on-7, once the whole team arrives, once you start getting into 11-on-11, then all of a sudden, can you make a play when things break down starts to have more value, starts to create more conversations among the beat reporters, among the coaches. And that's when you start to see the appreciation flip. When they went to 11 on 11, guess who suddenly looked like one of the best quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl? Oh, Jalen Hurts, right? Out of seemingly nowhere, right? Because we were all questioning. We're like, man, Hurts, what's going on? Like, I watch college football. This isn't the same guy. Put him in 11 on 11. Things change. That's what's happening now. It's corresponding, of course, with a Russell Wilson injury, but it's both the calf injury and as they start to get into camp, as you start getting into preseason, suddenly the coaches are going to put more value on, oh, this guy can help us get first downs, which can help us score points.
Yep.
Not just this guy was hitting his receivers between the numbers in these stationary drills earlier this year. That's a big thing to remember when you're trying to piece together what's happening at Steelers camp and how the coaches feel about quarterback X versus quarterback Y.
To a much lesser extent of that, I also think that Dearness Johnson is like that. Someone with the metrics that everything you look at for his career, it doesn't say even practice squad player. But then every time Dearness Johnson touches the NFL field, he's just good at the game. He's just really good. It's
just good at the game. So for me, Fields, Freiermuth, Calvin Austin stacks. Calvin Austin, another late round receiver we didn't talk about. But, Roman Wilson, he's week to week. Right? Think about the receivers that are week to week. There's now a bunch of receivers that are week to week. Puka Nacua, week to week. DeAndre Hopkins, week to week. Don't forget, Roman Wilson is week to week. He's missing incredibly valuable practice time. And who does that really help? Calvin Austin.
And that sucks because I have a lot of Roman Wilson also for May and June. Just hoping he could start in 2 wide receiver sets with no competition there. Whereas right now, Calvin Austin's only competition is Van Jefferson. So Calvin Austin, yes, backdooring with Justin Fields, both going in round 17 and 18 of underdog drafts. Of course you can do that.
The Fields and backdoor stack may be the epic backdoor stack of all time for best.
Because you could start with Chiefs passing game again for that correlation, soak up all of that, and then tack on a stack opposite of them, which no one's doing.
Ooh, baby. Yeah, so I mentioned DeAndre Hopkins, Puka. I'm not drafting these guys. These guys that are week to week throughout camp, I'm not doing it because there's healthy receivers you could draft at a similar ADP with, similar production profiles and projections. So why even do it? Give us some guys you're not drafting in the top 75. We'll put a marker down. Top 75 healthy players you're not drafting.
I've already touched on Jacobs, avoiding him at cost. James Cook. It's not a popular one, but it's another one I'm not worried about beating me, honestly, at cost.
He can't beat you. You're right. He can't. James Cook can't beat you.
Last year, even Joe Brady, everyone tried to take him off the field, especially in the red zone, but they couldn't because when they did that, it resulted in Ty Johnson and Latavius Murray and Leonard Fournette getting carries. So they had no choice but to put James Cook back on. But they clearly don't want to use James Cook inside the 10 and 5 where we get our touchdown equity from. So not worried about James Cook either. The only other one that to me doesn't fit inside the top 75, and Podfather, you're going to absolutely hate to hear this, and that is Ladd McConkey. Because of the offense he's in and that 4 seasons with the Ravens, even if you remove Lamar Jackson's carries, the Ravens led the league in run play rate from neutral game script with their running backs. Jim Harbaugh's offenses in San Francisco never finished outside the top 8. And that's
Stop. Are you saying that because their both last names are Harbaugh?
No. Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman.
Oh, Greg Roman. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Greg Roman.
Excuse me.
If I said John Harbaugh, I apologize.
I should have known that. That's my bad.
I could have said John Harbaugh.
No, that's my bad. I thought you were doing a Harbaugh correlation.
No. Come on.
Okay.
You would not invite me on the show if I'm actually.
I was excited because I was gonna really go in on that.
No. That's too easy to pick apart, and I wouldn't be where I am today if I was making that assumption. It's the fact that they're run-heavy offenses, and not only that, maybe you could open me up to this idea because McConkey also didn't play out wide in college, strictly a slot receiver for 70% of his routes. And so for an offense that's going to finish bottom 5 in passing volume, I'm just curious where he gets his volume from and how he gets on the field.
he's going to be the number one receiver.
You're out on Josh Palmer entirely at ADP because I'm not.
Josh
I like
Palmer
Josh Palmer
is
ADP.
the most average receiver in the history of the league. He has exactly 50th percentile everything on Player Profiler, of all the metrics: opportunity, efficiency, workouts, height, weight, everything. It's the average player. If AI generated Gemini create average receiver, Josh Palmer would appear on the screen. So no, I'm not worried about Josh Palmer. I think Josh Palmer, he's a perfectly fine, best ball receiver to just load up on. As I'm loading up on receivers, he's there. I'll have maybe a little bit. I think I'm overweight on him on Underdog, but I mean the upside there is that it's wide open. There's not a tight end that you're worried about. There's not a running back that you're worried about. The target share is wide open, and that's McConkey. I'm telling you, John, you had the right approach, which is can player X beat me? No, James Cook cannot beat you. Ladd McConkey at that ADP, you're in dangerous territory because that is Herbert. You may get bailed out by this Herbert injury. This Herbert injury may be part of what throttles this offense in addition to the play calling. So it could be hey, he's got the plantar fascia, his mobility is, we're trying to protect him, and then we're trying to run the ball. This is our philosophy. So there could be these twin effects suppressing the pass volume, but it just seems like such a lit up runway to be the lead receiver for a player that is, probably one of, if not the most talented receiver to come out that didn't have the production to support the talent for whatever reason. The situation that he was in Georgia. We know it with a guy with Michael Wilson, a little bit easier to understand because he was hurt so often, why he wasn't as productive. With Ladd McConkey, all the film scouts love him. Film scouts I trust love him in a way that has me convinced that he is the real deal. He did get the draft capital. He is a pretty impressive athlete. So there's a guy runs a sub 4.4 with that kind of route running prowess on a team with no target competition. That could hurt you, fading him.
Okay, this is why I come on, so we can listen to each other. So I'm open to adding more McConkey, but I have been scared admittedly through August at the time of this recording to draft him top 75.
I would not be scared of Ladd McConkey at all. I mean, I'd rather have Rashee Rice.
Oh, Rashee Rice is a second round player if he doesn't get suspended.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain players in the middle rounds that I would prefer, but I like McConkey. I mean, there's one particular analyst, R.C. Fisher, who has had the blazing takes in the history of this show that have gone the most viral. We're talking about millions of views on TikTok, and he's been right, man. And when he tells me that, this player is mechanically awesome, then I believe him. He hasn't been wrong yet. He hasn't led me wrong yet in terms of film analysis. So there's a lot going for McConkey when you actually think about it. I don't love this. Listen, this plantar fascia I don't like. I don't love Herbert coming into the season injured. I do not like that at all. It makes me not want to draft him. And then the Herbert McConkey stacks. If you're not going to be stacking, then McConkey becomes less attractive in best ball right there. So there's reasons to not be necessarily big overweight on McConkey, but I wouldn't fade him.
Okay. Heard.
In terms of trap in Los Angeles, Kimani Vidal. He's a guy I was celebrating during the draft, but man, I was hoping there would be some whisper of something. Have you heard a whisper? Because you used to work at Roto World. I mean, you know how to sniff out the beat reporters and these long articles in The Athletic to find that one sentence. What's going on with Vidal, man?
Unfortunately, the whisper is that he's currently playing behind Isaiah Spiller, let alone everyone else ahead of them on the Chargers depth chart. That's what's happening right now. And we don't draft Kimani Vidal in the later rounds for him to be a starter in August. That'd be great, don't get me wrong. We're still targeting the second half of the season, though. But so far, he's been the team's 4th and 5th string running back.
There's just no guarantees.
Sure.
There's no guarantee. They have Dotson. I mean, I can just see it now, man. I can close my eyes and I can see it now. So many people screaming for Vidal in week 6, week 7, and it just not happening. I've seen this movie too many times.
He's a 6th round running back. Of course it could fail.
I mean, it really... Do you remember Dwayne McBride?
I do. I had a lot of Dwayne McBride last year, actually, as one of the bets with Ty Chandler against Alexander Madison in the 6th round.
Alexander Madison stinks. He's dust. Ty Chandler is a slasher. Ty Chandler is sort of a one-dimensional slasher. Yeah. Why not Dwayne McBride? Like, I get it. I'm here for it. But if the coaching staff is not interested,
right,
then it's hard for me to have the faith that, week 6, the light's going to come on and they're going to figure out this guy's good. It's a difficult bridge to cross. Who you got, Chris Godwin or Deontay Johnson?
It has to be Deontay Johnson for me, because historically Baker Mayfield has been one of the league's worst quarterbacks under pressure through his first 5 seasons in the league. And the last year under Dave Canales, who we consider a offensive guru, quarterback whisperer, he was 7th in EPA per dropback when pressured. So I attribute Baker's contract, his breakout 2023, I just give it entirely to Canales. And I think then the Bucs are probably going to be in trouble in the passing game. So I'm taking Deontay Johnson, who at least we know with the Steelers literally led the team in targets every year, even as a rookie, has shown that's what he does.
I mean, Deontay Johnson's going to get so many targets.
So many
targets. I mean, they're going to wear him out. I'm worried about his hands. So a lot of players are worried about injuries to their legs, their knees, their hips, their shoulders. I'm worried about his hands, like the skin peeling off because of all the targets. Yeah. Anyway. Late round tight end, percolating. Musgrave, percolating. Noah Fant, percolating. Greg Dulcich, percolating. Buzz. So who you been drafting? Who do you have more of in terms of exposure of those 3 guys?
I like all of them, but I have the most exposure in Noah Fant. I think everyone forgets Noah Fant is still only 26 years old, because it seems like we've been doing this with him for over a decade. But finally, Colby Parkinson, Will Dissly moved on in free agency. We have to assume that Fant's going to get every down run and is still an elite athlete with amazing hands who can earn targets in that every down role. So I have been betting on Noah Fant as a last round tight end, even in 2 tight end builds. I'm having that much confidence in him.
Oh yeah. And Dulcich too. Like Dulcich and Fant, very similar. They're both athletes. They're both great athletic profiles. And they've just been forgotten about for whatever reason. Like 1 year, 2 years in Fant's case, 1 year in Dulcich's case. And they played a couple games, get injured, or just in a truly horrific situation where the offense does not put a premium on the tight end at all. Things change, man. The problem with the tight end position is they're so at the mercy of the whims of the quarterback and the offensive coordinator and the surrounding weaponry. When things break their way, if they have that explosiveness and the hands, and Fant has the hands and the explosiveness, that's all he needs. I've seen him hurdle a guy on a screen pass and then go 50 yards for a touchdown in Denver. That's the same guy. He's not any different. He just has been misused, miscast. I love it. What about Taysom Hill?
Oh, it's too easy, right?
Too easy.
Anywhere where Taysom Hill is a tight end, You would start him if you have that choice. You don't have to make that choice in best ball. But even if we're talking about redraft, you would start him over Dallas Goedert weekly. Like Taysom has literally matched Alvin Kamara in carries inside the 10-yard line over the last 2 years. That's a tight end getting that kind of rushing volume, let alone what he does as a wide receiver and getting quarterback snaps. Honestly, like if David Njoku matches his production from Deshaun Watson last year, rather than being the player he was with Joe Flacco because he was treated differently, then you would start Taysom Hill over David Njoku too. And Njoku's going significantly higher.
I love Njoku. I can't draft Njoku. This is very similar to how I feel about running back in that, okay, if it's Bijan, I'm in, right? And then with maybe an exception for a Rachaad White, Saquon Barkley, but I believe these to be elite talents at running back. And then when those players are off the board, I'm out on running back for rounds and rounds. Let the James Cooks pass me by. Bye-bye, right? Nick Chubb, bye-bye. Let them all pass water under the bridge, right? I have the same approach with tight end. I want Kincaid. I want Pitts. And once these guys with the tight end 1 profiles and tight end 1 in their range of outcomes, once they're past me, then I'm waiting. I'm letting all these Schultzes and Fergusons, and I'm letting them all pass under the bridge because I know out there in the distance, there's Musgrave, there's Fant, there's Dulcich, there's Taysom Hill. And there's very little difference. The arbitrage is so clear.
The only other one I consider a steal based on ADP, and it's because he really doesn't have an ADP, is Colby Parkinson. Because when Tyler Higbee suffered his torn ACL, there's no guarantee that Higbee comes back at all. And Parkinson, from Sean McVay and the Rams, got the most guaranteed cash of any tight end in free agency. So given that he's an above-average run blocker and he has no competition, I do think Parkinson's going to be an every down player at an undrafted cost as well.
I just wish there were more final rounds at Underdog.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Underdog doesn't have enough final rounds. There's all these guys, these Meltons, these Parkinsons, right? These Jamal Williams. Like, they're not enough final rounds. There's only one. The crime is you can only draft once in the final round on Underdog. That's the real crime. In fact, I'm going to talk to the people on Underdog. I'm going to be like, listen, the big flaw in your game is you can only draft once in the final round because I like 7 guys. It's a crime I can't get them all.
Tell them to add more final rounds. That's the goal.
We need more final rounds. Or give me more picks in the final round, but no one else. How about that? What about in Dynasty, though? We haven't talked much Dynasty. Give me a truther guy that you're holding on to in your taxi squad.
Oddly enough, I think he's finally coming to fruition, and that is Greg Dortch is still around.
Yes.
And I think he's going to be in 3 wide sets for the Cardinals after he proved himself with Kyler Murray in the second half of last year. We've only seen a sprinkling of games he's been a full-time player. But in the 10 career games, Dortch has recorded a 70% route rate. He's averaged 11.2 fantasy points. And 11.2 is exactly what Cooper Kupp averaged as the wide receiver 27.5 PPR last year. And Dortch in Dynasty and Best Ball treated as a last-round player when, again, we're looking at wide receiver 2-3 stats.
Shameless. You are shameless. Mentioning Greg Dortch and Cooper Kupp in the same sentence. Shameless. How dare you? I love it. I love it.
Where we are.
Okay. Bold prediction. I'll get you out of here, John. Bold prediction for 2024.
If you look at the theme of fantasy football and where elite quarterbacks are going, it does seem like Jaden Daniels is becoming the steal of fantasy drafts just for his rushing upside. A career 9.7 rushing points per game at LSU. But then look at what else is happening around him. We don't like Cliff Kingsbury necessarily as an NFL play caller, but the fact is that he not only led Kyler Murray to a QB1 finish, top 12 quarterback in points per game as a rookie, but also the Cardinals in their 4 seasons being coached by Cliff Kingsbury in that spread scheme ran against stacked boxes, 8+ defenders at the league's lowest rate because the spread scheme takes the defenders away and gives more room for mobile quarterbacks like Jaden Daniels. Not only that, but in 5 seasons with the Falcons, Dan Quinn's defenses never ranked in the top half in EPA per play because like a Norv Turner, Wade Phillips, Freddie Kitchens, he's one of those guys when he takes on too much, it just doesn't make sense for them to have one role in being a good play caller on defense. So given all of that and the fact we're going to get volume and those rushing points from Jaden Daniels, I believe he outscores CJ Stroud in fantasy this year.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.